from a revolutionary camera used for the first time ever to a Hollywood legend forced to star in his own film after 3 A-listers refused. And Harlem residents vetoing Sidney Poitier himself across 110th Street hides production secrets more surprising than its gritty storyline. Get ready to discover the bizarre casting battles, groundbreaking technology, and shocking controversies behind this cult classic crime thriller. Fact 1. 3 Hollywood legends rejected the lead role. When Anthony Quinn signed on as executive producer for Across 110th Street in 1972, he had no intention of starring in the film himself. Quinn envisioned the role of Captain Frank Matelli, the aging, prejudiced Italian-American cop at the center of the story, as a vehicle for one of Hollywood's biggest names. His first choice was John Wayne, the iconic Western star who embodied rugged American masculinity on screen. Wayne passed on the role, likely uncomfortable with playing such a morally compromised and openly racist character. Undeterred, Quinn then approached Kirk Douglas, another Hollywood heavyweight known for his intense dramatic performances. Douglas also declined the opportunity. Quinn's third choice was Burt Lancaster, an actor celebrated for his versatility and commanding screen presence. Lancaster, too, turned down the part. With 3 major stars rejecting the role consecutively, Quinn found himself in a difficult position as producer. The film's production schedule was moving forward, financing was in place, and the crew was ready to begin shooting on location in Harlem. Rather than continue the search for another big-name actor and risk further delays or losing the production window entirely, Quinn made the pragmatic decision to cast himself in the lead role. This wasn't exactly what he'd planned, but it kept the cameras rolling. Quinn's performance as the corrupt, rough-edged Captain Matelli ultimately became one of the film's strengths, bringing a weary authenticity to a character navigating a changing world he no longer understands. What began as a last resort casting choice turned into a compelling portrayal that anchored the entire film, proving that sometimes the backup plan works out better than anyone expected. Fact 2. Harlem residents blocked Sidney Poitier's casting. Anthony Quinn didn't just have trouble casting his own role, he also faced an unexpected obstacle when trying to cast the film's other lead character, Lieutenant William Pope. Quinn originally hoped to land Sidney Poitier for the part, which would have been a major coup for the production. Poitier was at the height of his fame in the early 1970s, having become Hollywood's first major black leading man with roles in groundbreaking films like In the Heat of the Night and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. On paper, Poitier seemed like the perfect choice to play the educated, principled young police lieutenant investigating a bloody Harlem heist. However, when word spread through the Harlem community that Poitier was being considered for the role, local residents voiced strong objections. They felt Poitier's polished Hollywood image and refined persona made him completely wrong for a gritty street-level crime drama set in their neighborhood. Community members described him as too Hollywood and not urban enough to authentically portray someone navigating the harsh realities of 1970s Harlem. This wasn't just casual criticism. The filmmakers had been actively consulting with various African-American organizations about the production, and this feedback came through those channels. Faced with legitimate concerns from the very community where they'd be filming, Quinn and director Barry Shear relented and began looking for alternatives. They ultimately cast Yaphet Kotto in the role, an actor whose grounded intensity and raw authenticity made him a perfect fit. Kotto brought a subdued power to Lieutenant Pope that contrasted effectively with Quinn's explosive Captain Matelli, creating one of the film's most compelling dynamics. The Harlem community's intervention resulted in casting that better served both the story and its setting. Fact 3. First feature film shot with revolutionary camera. Across 110th Street holds a significant place in cinema history that has nothing to do with its plot or performances. It was the first feature film ever shot using the Aeroflex 35BL camera, a revolutionary piece of technology that would transform filmmaking. Before 1972, cinematographers faced a frustrating dilemma. 35mm cameras were either small and portable, but incredibly noisy, making synchronized sound recording impossible, or they were large, quiet, studio-bound monsters that weighed up to 80 pounds and required extensive rigging. The Arriflex 35BL, released in 1972, solved this problem by being the first self-blimped silent 35mm camera that was also reasonably portable at 33 pounds. Co-producer Fuad Saeed, who had extensive location shooting experience from his work on the television series I Spy, recognized the camera's potential for the gritty Harlem locations across 110th Street required. Said personally persuaded Volker Bonneman, Vice President of the United States ARE Division, to loan the production this brand-new, untested camera for 1 week. This was a significant risk for ARE, as the camera had literally just been released and had never been used on a major feature film production. The timing was perfect. The camera was unveiled at the 1972 Munich Summer Olympics, and across 110th Street became its first narrative film test. Cinematographer Jack Priestley immediately recognized its value, particularly for shooting in the cramped apartments, narrow hallways, and tight interior spaces that Harlem locations demanded. The camera's quiet operation and flexibility proved so invaluable that what started as a 1-week loan extended throughout most of the production, helping create the film's distinctive documentary-style aesthetic. Fact 4. Bobby Womack had 2 weeks and 1 viewing. The iconic soundtrack that became one of across 110th Street's most memorable elements almost didn't happen, thanks to a record company that severely underestimated Bobby Womack's abilities. When Womack was approached to write songs for the film, he was eager to prove himself in the world of movie soundtracks, especially after seeing the success Isaac Hayes achieved with Shaft and Curtis Mayfield with Superfly. However, the record company executives had serious doubts about whether Womack could handle the assignment. Rather than giving him the support and resources typically provided to film composers, they imposed severe restrictions designed to minimize their risk. The company allowed Womack to watch the film exactly once, just a single screening to absorb the story, characters, mood, and visual style he'd need to capture musically. After that one viewing, Womack had to rely entirely on his memory and notes. Even more challenging, the executives gave him only 2 weeks to write, compose, and record the entire soundtrack. This was an extremely tight deadline for scoring a feature film, especially considering that jazz trombonist J.J. Johnson was handling the instrumental score while Womack focused on the songs. Most film composers would consider this timeline nearly impossible. Despite these constraints, or perhaps motivated by them, Womack delivered a soundtrack that not only perfectly captured the desperation and gritty reality of Harlem street life, but also produced one of the most memorable title songs in 1970s cinema. The record company's lack of faith in Womack's abilities couldn't have been more wrong. He proved them spectacularly incorrect, creating music that would outlive and outlast the film itself in popular culture. Fact 5. The film version song differs from the hit single Bobby Womack's title song Across 110th Street became a chart success in 1973, reaching number 19 on Billboard's Hot Soul Singles chart and number 56 on the Hot 100. But audiences who saw the film in theaters heard something different from what radio listeners experienced. The version of the song that plays during the movie's opening credits is not the same recording that was released as a single and appeared on the soundtrack album that fans could purchase. These weren't just minor mixing differences or alternate takes. They were distinct versions of the song with notable variations in arrangement, instrumentation, and vocal performance. This practice wasn't uncommon in 1970s film productions, where filmmakers sometimes preferred a specific version for the movie's dramatic purposes, while record labels chose a different mix optimized for radio play and commercial success. The film version was tailored to match the gritty, raw opening sequence showing a Cadillac driving through Manhattan up to Harlem, setting the movie's dark tone. The single version, meanwhile, was polished for maximum radio appeal and chart potential. When Quentin Tarantino famously used Across 110th Street for the opening credits of his 1997 film Jackie Brown, he chose the hit single version rather than the original film version, as did Ridley Scott when he featured the song in American Gangster in 2007. This means that most modern audiences who've discovered the song through these later films have actually heard the radio version, not the version that 1970s moviegoers heard when Across 110th Street first hit theaters. The original film version remains a deeper cut for dedicated soundtrack collectors and film music enthusiasts. Fact 6. First black stunt coordinator to receive screen credit. Across 110th Street achieved another important Hollywood milestone that had nothing to do with its story or box office performance. It featured Eddie Smith as the first African-American stunt coordinator to receive on-screen credit in the history of American film. This might seem like a minor technical detail, but it represented a significant breakthrough in an industry that had systematically excluded black stunt performers from recognition and opportunity for decades. Before the late 1960s, black actors couldn't even perform their own stunts in Hollywood productions. Instead, white stunt performers were used and made up with dark makeup in a practice called painting down, which was considered acceptable industry standard. This meant that even when black actors starred in films, white stunt doubles would be darkened with paint or makeup to perform their action sequences. Eddie Smith was a founding member of the Black Stuntmen's Association, an organization formed in 1967 specifically to combat these discriminatory practices and create opportunities for black stunt performers who were being systematically shut out of the industry. The association trained its members in various stunt techniques, fought for fair hiring practices, and gradually began placing performers in television shows like Mission Impossible and films like Dirty Harry. By 1972, when Across 110th Street went into production, the organization had made enough progress that Smith could be hired not just as a performer, but as the coordinator, and crucially, could receive proper on-screen credit for his work. This credit wasn't just recognition for Smith personally, it represented validation for the entire Black Stuntmen's Association and opened doors for future black stunt coordinators in Hollywood productions. Fact 7. 95% shot at 60. Real Locations director Barry Shear insisted on filming Across 110th Street entirely on location in Harlem, despite warnings from Hollywood colleagues who tried to dissuade him from the idea. Industry veterans told Shear that shooting in New York would be prohibitively expensive due to labor costs, that securing filming permits would be a bureaucratic nightmare, and that Harlem itself was simply too dangerous for a film crew in the early 1970s. Shear ignored all these warnings and committed to authentic location shooting, believing the film's gritty realism depended on capturing actual Harlem streets, buildings, and atmosphere, rather than recreating them on Hollywood soundstages. The production ultimately filmed 95% of the movie at 60 different interior and exterior locations throughout Harlem, an extraordinary number of real locations for any film of that era. These weren't just establishing shots or background footage. The crew shot actual scenes inside real Harlem police stations, neighborhood bars, private apartments, and various street corners throughout the community. Many of these locations added unexpected authenticity precisely because they were genuine spaces where real people lived and worked. Some of the apartment buildings and tenements used for filming were in severe disrepair or had already been condemned by the city, which Shear and the production team saw as beneficial rather than problematic. Since these buildings were scheduled for demolition anyway, the crew could fire blank rounds and pepper the walls with realistic-looking bullet holes without worrying about property damage or restoration costs. This gave the film's intense shootout sequences a visceral authenticity that would have been difficult to achieve on controlled studio sets. The extensive location work, combined with the revolutionary Arriflex 35 BL camera's portability, gave Across 110th Street a documentary-like visual quality that set it apart from other crime films of the period. Fact 8. Camera extended from 1 week to 5. when co-producer Fouad Syed convinced the United States ARRI division to loan the production their brand-new ARRIFlex 35BL camera, the agreement was explicitly limited to 1 week of shooting. This wasn't an arbitrary restriction. ARRI had just released this revolutionary camera and needed it back for other demonstrations, potential client showcases, and the Munich Olympics documentation for which it had been specifically prepared. The camera represented a significant investment and technological breakthrough, and ARRI was understandably protective of their only available unit. However, once cinematographer Jack Priestley started working with the camera during that first week of production, he realized it was absolutely transforming how they could shoot the film. The camera's quiet operation allowed them to record clean dialogue in cramped Harlem apartments and tight interior spaces where traditional sound recording would have been impossible or required extensive post-production work. Its relatively lightweight and compact design meant Priestley could capture handheld shots that gave the film its gritty, documentary-style aesthetic. The camera's flexibility proved particularly valuable when shooting in confined quarters like narrow hallways, small rooms, and crowded streets where larger equipment simply wouldn't fit. Priestley became convinced that using this camera throughout the entire production was essential to maintaining visual consistency and achieving the authentic street-level perspective director Barry Shear envisioned. He successfully persuaded the ARRI representatives to extend the loan, and what had started as a 1-week trial ultimately stretched to 5 weeks, covering the majority of the production's shooting schedule. This extended use of the ARRIFlex 35BL on across 110th Street essentially served as an extended real-world test that helped establish the camera's reputation and proved its value for location-intensive filmmaking. Fact 9. United Artists Theater Booking Controversy. When Across 110th Street was ready for theatrical release in early 1973, it sparked an unexpected controversy in Cleveland, Ohio that highlighted the racial discrimination still prevalent in film distribution practices. United Artists, the studio distributing the film, had initially booked the movie only in white-owned theaters for its first-run screenings in Cleveland, completely bypassing black-owned theaters despite the film's Harlem setting, predominantly black cast, and themes directly addressing racial tensions. This decision didn't go unnoticed. Various community groups and organizations began applying pressure on United Artists to change their discriminatory booking policy and include black-owned theaters in the first-run distribution. The pushback was significant enough that United Artists ultimately reversed their decision, though reports at the time indicated there was conflicting information about exactly what kind of pressure had been applied and whether it was community activism, threatened boycotts, or other factors that forced the change. Regardless of the specific tactics used, United Artists agreed to book Across 110th Street at the Scrumpy Dump, a black-owned theater in Cleveland, giving it first-run status alongside the white-owned venues. This was a meaningful victory for fair representation in film distribution, particularly for a movie that dealt explicitly with racial divisions and featured significant black talent both in front of and behind the camera. The controversy highlighted how discrimination extended beyond just who appeared in films to include who had the economic opportunity to profit from showing them. A Variety article published on February 28, 1973, documented this reversal, noting that the conflicting accounts made determining the real reason behind United Artists' decision difficult to pin down definitively, though the outcome remained significant regardless of the precise motivation. Fact 10. Filmmakers consulted. Multiple black organizations. Recognizing the sensitive nature of the subject matter they were tackling, the creative team behind Across 110th Street took an unusual step for early 1970s Hollywood. They actively sought input from African American community organizations before and during production. Director Barry Shear, producer Anthony Quinn, and the film's casting director arranged meetings with various black organizations to discuss multiple aspects of the production, from casting decisions to script content to how different black characters would be depicted on screen. Among the groups they consulted were Afro-American Day, Incorporated, and the Congress of Racial Equality, both organizations with significant credibility and influence in the Black community. These weren't just token meetings or publicity gestures. The consultations actually influenced production decisions, as evidenced by the community feedback that led to Yaphet Kotto being cast instead of Sidney Poitier after Harlem residents raised concerns about Poitier's suitability for the role. The organizations provided feedback on the script, voicing concerns about stereotypes, character development, and whether the film's depiction of Black criminals and Black police officers would reinforce harmful images or provide more nuanced portrayals. This consultation process was relatively rare in Hollywood at the time, particularly for a genre film that could have easily proceeded without any community input. While the final film still functioned within certain limitations and conventions, including the requirement that the Black police lieutenant be portrayed as righteous and educated, the willingness to engage with Black organizations represented a meaningful attempt to avoid the most exploitative elements common in Blaxploitation cinema. The consultations also helped the production gain access to Harlem locations and build trust with community members who might otherwise have been hostile to Hollywood filmmakers invading their neighborhood with cameras and crew. Fact 11. Banned in South Africa in 1973. Despite earning an estimated $3.4 million in North American rentals during 1973 and receiving a theatrical release in numerous countries worldwide, Across 110th Street faced an outright ban in South Africa that same year. The South African Publications Control Board, the government censorship body responsible for reviewing and restricting films, books, and other media under the apartheid regime, prohibited the film from being shown in the country. The board's decision stemmed from the film's explicit treatment of racial conflict, its depiction of violence between white and Black characters, and its unflinching portrayal of institutional racism within law enforcement. Under South Africa's apartheid system, which legally enforced racial segregation and white minority rule, the government maintained strict control over media content that might challenge racial hierarchies or present Black characters in positions of authority or power. Across 110th Street violated multiple unwritten rules of what the apartheid government found acceptable. The film featured a Black police lieutenant in charge of a case with a white captain working under him, depicted Italian mobsters being challenged and threatened by Black organized crime leaders, and showed white authority figures as corrupt and morally compromised, while some Black characters maintained dignity and principles despite their circumstances. The film's graphic violence, particularly violence directed at white characters by Black characters, was especially problematic for South African censors who worked to maintain the fiction of white supremacy and Black subjugation. This ban placed Across 110th Street in company with numerous other films deemed threatening to apartheid ideology during the 1970s, though the ban became somewhat meaningless decades later when apartheid finally ended in the early 1990s. Fact 12. Condemned buildings were production gold. The dilapidated state of many Harlem buildings in the early 1970s, a direct result of decades of economic disinvestment and urban decay, unexpectedly became a significant production advantage for Across 110th Street. When location scouts identified apartment buildings, tenements, and other structures throughout Harlem for potential filming sites, they discovered that many were in severe disrepair or had already been officially condemned by New York City authorities and were scheduled for eventual demolition. Rather than viewing these deteriorating buildings as problematic or unsuitable for filming, director Barry Shear and the production team recognized them as perfect locations that actually enhanced the film's authentic, gritty atmosphere while providing practical benefits for the production. The condemned status of these buildings meant the crew could be much more aggressive with the physical demands of filming violent action sequences than they could in occupied or historically significant structures. Specifically, production could fire blank rounds during shootout scenes and create realistic-looking bullet holes, scorch marks, and other battle damage on walls, ceilings, and fixtures without worrying about property damage claims or costly restoration work afterward. Since these buildings were heading for the wrecking ball regardless of what happened during filming, there were no concerns about preserving architectural integrity or returning them to their original condition. This freedom allowed the film's climactic shootout sequence, which takes place in an abandoned tenement building, to feature extensive gunfire, with bullets chipping plaster, splintering wood, and creating the chaotic destruction of a genuine firefight. The decaying, grimy interiors of these condemned buildings also required no set dressing to look appropriately desperate and desolate. They already embodied the urban decay and poverty the film depicted, adding a layer of uncomfortable authenticity that studio sets could never match. Fact 13. Film featured future Rocky actor. Film history enthusiasts watching across 110th Street carefully might spot a familiar face in one of the early scenes, though he appears years before achieving widespread fame. Burt Young, who would later become internationally recognized as Paulie Panino in the Rocky film series, has a small but memorable role in Across 110th Street as one of the Italian mobsters present during the opening heist sequence that sets the entire story in motion. Young appears as a character named Lapides, one of the white organized crime figures counting money in the Harlem apartment when the disguised robbers burst in and the situation explodes into violence. This role came 4 years before Young would be cast in 1976's Rocky, where his performance as the bitter alcoholic Paulie, brother-in-law to Sylvester Stallone's Rocky Balboa, would earn him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor and make him a household name. Young would reprise the Paulie character in all 6 Rocky sequels spanning decades, making it his most famous role. But in 1972, Young was still a working character actor, taking whatever roles came his way, including this brief appearance in a gritty crime thriller. His presence in Across 110th Street places him within the vibrant New York independent film scene of the early 1970s, alongside other future stars who were paying their dues in similar productions. Young's gravelly voice, stocky build, and ability to portray working-class toughness served him well in both films, though the characters existed in vastly different moral universes. Spotting Young in this early role adds an interesting layer for modern viewers familiar with his later work, showing him already embodying the blue-collar authenticity that would define his most memorable performances. Fact 14. Camera eliminated. Need for post-production. Dubbing the Arriflex 35BL camera didn't just make filming easier for the Across 110th Street crew, it fundamentally changed the production's post-production workflow by solving one of the most persistent technical problems in location filmmaking. Camera operator Saul Negrin, who worked extensively with the new equipment throughout the shoot, noted that the camera's exceptionally quiet operation completely eliminated the need for post-production dubbing of dialogue. This was a revolutionary development because traditional 35mm cameras generated so much mechanical noise from their film transport mechanisms, motors, and internal components that recording clean dialogue on set was often impossible. The camera noise would contaminate the audio tracks, making the actors' dialogue unusable or severely compromised. Films shot with noisy cameras typically required actors to return to a recording studio weeks or months after filming, wrapped to re-record all their dialogue while watching their footage, a process called looping or automated dialogue replacement. This post-production dubbing was time-consuming, expensive, and often resulted in audio that didn't quite match the actors' lip movements or the acoustic environment of the original location. The Arriflex 35BL's self-blimp design, with its internal sound insulation and quieter mechanical components, reduced operational noise to approximately 20 decibels, quiet enough that microphones could capture clean dialogue even in tight interior spaces without camera noise interference. For Across 110th Street, this meant the raw production sound recorded on location in cramped Harlem apartments could be used directly in the final film, preserving the authentic acoustic atmosphere of each space and the spontaneous energy of the actors' performances. This capability saved the production significant time and money while contributing to the film's documentary-like immediacy and authenticity. Fact 15. Title card is a highway exit sign. Across 110th Street announces itself with a clever bit of visual storytelling that establishes the film's central geographic and thematic concept before a single character appears on screen. Rather than using a traditional title card with text simply displayed over an image, the filmmakers integrated the title directly into the opening sequence's location. The film begins with aerial and tracking shots following a 1968 black Cadillac as it drives north through Manhattan, heading uptown toward Harlem. As the car approaches its destination, the camera captures an actual highway exit sign on the Henry Hudson Parkway, marking the 110th Street exit. This real traffic sign then transforms or transitions into the film's title card, with the movie's name appearing as if it were part of the highway's signage system. This creative choice accomplished multiple things simultaneously. First, it grounded the story immediately in a specific, real place rather than a generic urban setting, establishing that 110th Street isn't just a title, but an actual geographic boundary with social significance. Second, it educated viewers unfamiliar with New York City's layout about the street's location and importance. And third, it reinforced the central metaphor that runs throughout the film, that 110th Street represents not just a physical border, but a dividing line between different worlds, specifically between Harlem and the rest of Manhattan, between black and white communities, between poverty and wealth. The use of an actual highway sign for the title card creates a documentary-style authenticity from the very first frame, signaling to audiences that this film intends to deal with real places and real social divisions rather than Hollywood fantasy. It's a sophisticated touch that demonstrates how the filmmakers thought carefully about every aspect of the production,